This week we got to speak with a Rocklin, California, Northern California basketball legend, the head varsity coach of Rocklin High School, Steve Taylor, and he delivered. We got to ask him a lot of not just basketball questions, but personal questions, and he opened up about things that he said he hadn't opened up about before. Really got a fantastic story from him.
Yeah, I love a sports coach. Like, I just think that it's so important. It's something that a lot of us are familiar with, and especially the impact it has on, like, we all have stories, whether you're a parent or a child, like of coaching and sports. And so anytime we get to sit and hear somebody talk about their journey with sports, but also their just leadership in that role, I think is really cool.
Yeah, he did such a good job of balancing the X's and O's, because we talked about some of that, and the people he's had an influence on him and he's met throughout his career, and comparing some of the teams, current and past. And
oh, you loved that part.
I did love that. And some of the championships and the heartache of losing, and what a coach really goes through, not just the coach, but the family. I thought it was incredibly insightful. I just really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah. It wasn't just about the sports. I think that was a really big part of the conversation, is the toll it can take on you, right? The pressures and what that might be like. And to hear his experience and the choices that he made that were for, the best for himself or the best for the team, I think was something that everyone should listen into.
Yeah, you all are going to enjoy this one, so stay motivated, stay inspired, and enjoy this episode with Steve Taylor.
Welcome to Tell Us Your Story, the podcast that tells the diverse stories of businesses, leaders, and influencers throughout Northern California. Our mission is to ignite inspiration, foster education, and bring our community together. Join us as we unravel the path to achievement, discovering how these remarkable businesses and leaders navigated obstacles, conquered hardships, and transformed failures into success.
So I was born in San Pablo, the East Bay. My dad went to high school at Rocklin High, and his family was in that area as he got into high school. And then my parents moved to Redding, California when I was really young. Lived there for a few years, and then we moved to Rocklin in 1968.
Oh, wow. So you've been here a long time.
So we got here. My dad would tell you the exact population, but I believe it was something like 2680, something like that in 1968. And we moved here because my dad got a job as the principal and superintendent out at Penryn Elementary, and he was in education. And so I went to school here at Rocklin Elementary and Parker Whitney, and then went to Roseville High School.
So let's start with elementary. So is it just you, your only child?
So my sister is 2 years older, Susan, and she lives up in Grass Valley. And so that's just the two of us. And we lived over on South Whitney Boulevard in the duplexes. That was 2719 South Whitney. That was the hood. I mean, that was our neighborhood, and it was fun because that's where Rocklin ended. That Whitney Boulevard, and then up on top of the hill, Casa Grande, where Parker Whitney was, there was nothing beyond that. It was all field all the way to Lincoln.
Long time ago. So when you were going through elementary, middle, what type of student were you?
I was a good student because both my parents were in education. My mom was a first grade teacher out at Green Hills Elementary in Granite Bay area, and my dad was a teacher and then became a principal. So school was always fun for me, but it was, I always did pretty well. I think things were simpler. You went to class, you worked hard, you played at recess, a lot of tetherball, a lot of, every sport possible. And on weekends, you were out when it was sunny, and you had to be home before it got dark.
Yeah, I can relate. Different times.
Just fun times. And you played with the kids in your neighborhood. And but I was a good student. I enjoyed school, but I really enjoyed just being active and involved.
And what kind of just kid in general were you? Were you?
I think I didn't really get in trouble much at school because my dad, as the principal at those times, he would tell stories that he had this big wiffle ball paddle. And Mr. Lehman was the principal at Parker Whitney. And John Lehman was just a wonderful man. But my dad would tell stories about kids getting in trouble, and they'd come to his office, and you'd either get 2 smacks or you'd get a call to your parents. And he said 100 out of 100 times kids would take a smack in the butt because they didn't want anybody calling their parents because they would get way worse at home.
Mm-hmm.
And so
times have changed.
Yeah. And so I was always
gonna say
afraid to get sent to the office because, first of all, I would have never had him call my house because my dad, he would have brought the paddle home.
Yeah.
But Mr. Lehman was, he was a figure that we respected. And I think one time I got in trouble we were playing tackle football and we were supposed to play touch, and he came out and told us. And then I can remember vividly, this is maybe 4th or 5th grade. We're playing and he leaves and we get back to playing tackle football, and I tackle a guy and I'm laying on the ground with him and I look up and Mr. Lehman's right there. And so that was as close to getting in trouble. But I don't know. I think kids respected what was going on in education more. Like we were fearful of ever having our parents know that we would get in trouble. I loved school. School was fun.
And as you went into middle school, early high school, were you playing any sports? Were you an athletic?
Yeah, but at that time, Little League baseball was huge in Rocklin. It was Tri-City Little League only. And then there were no other really organized recreational activities. There wasn't flag football. And if you wanted to play tackle football, you had to go to Roseville, the Roseville Bobcats. And but we just never did. We played a lot of two-hand touch. And then at Rocklin Elementary, the only sports there were boys and girls basketball. And so we played 7th and 8th grade basketball. But we were a small school, and we'd play Warren T. Ike was our big rival because they were the only middle school in Roseville. But then we'd play Loomis and Penryn and some of the smaller schools around. So I was always active, and I was a pretty good baseball player, probably a better baseball player than any other sport, even through high school. But there was like soccer didn't exist. We didn't know what soccer was. At some point in high school, somebody said, it's this sport that came from Europe or something. And I remember, when Kyle Rote Jr., they started a soccer league and nobody knew who he was. And then Pele came and different soccer started coming into the United States. But it was really, football, basketball, baseball, and that was about it.
And
growing a kid.
Through high school as well, did you play all 3 sports?
So I played football and baseball and basketball all 3 sports my first 2 years. And then my junior year, I wanted to kind of focus on basketball, so I didn't play football my junior year. Played basketball and baseball. And then I missed it, and I went back out for football my senior year, and then played basketball and was playing baseball. And I had a situation, my grandfather passed away in my senior year, and it kind of threw me for a loop in the spring. He used to be like my biggest baseball fan. Yeah. And I kind of just struggled with just life for a little bit, and I ended up quitting baseball with like 3 weeks left in the season, a month left in the season, just because I was just kind of struggling. And as it turned out, it didn't impact me at all. I went on to play basketball in college, but I looked back and it was just a weird time. And, I just didn't want to be out there because my grandpa wasn't there. Yeah. And it didn't have very much time to get through stuff, and, and no one's really talking to you about it. And I remember I didn't even tell my parents I quit, and my dad he was really angry and, frustrated, but it was just one of these things.
You're going through
the pressure. I didn't want to do it. And I went out there and I was like, I just don't want to be out here. So.
And so what were your aspirations in high school when you were looking forward? Did you know you were going to college? Was military a path? Was it sports? What was it?
So military, actually, my dad wanted me to go into the ROTC program at a college. And I thought that would be a possibility. It was a way to get college paid for. Both my parents were teachers and a principal. We were middle income folks, which you got no financial aid at that time. So that was a possibility, but the enlistment at that time, I think, was 6 years if they paid for your college. And I just couldn't see myself, couldn't think that far ahead as a high school kid. So I think at some point college was was going to be a path. Just both my parents went to college, and I took those aptitude tests that they gave a lot at that time, and it was park ranger because I like the outdoors. Well, I remember I think Prop 13 passed, and they cut all these funds from everything. So then there was no jobs, and I didn't know how to be a park ranger. I just thought, it'd be great being outdoors and fishing game, and I like to fish and hunt, and but there was no job supposedly. So I went to Davis, University of Davis recruited me for basketball, and they were the biggest school that recruited me. So I went there to play basketball my freshman year. And a little backstory, football was also, I was a pretty good football player, but my senior year, when I went back out, there was a junior quarterback who I competed with, and his name was Robbie Bosco. Well, Robbie ended up going to BYU and playing in the NFL. Yeah. So my senior year, because I played quarterback my sophomore year, and I went out my senior year. I thought, okay, I got a chance to play quarterback. Well, Robbie was really good, so I ended up being a pretty good free safety and a backup quarterback.
Quick adjustment.
Robbie and I are still friends to this day. But he's the quarterback of BYU when they won the national championship in football. I want to say it was 1984, so 85. Yeah. So it was the only time, and they'll never have a chance to win it because, well, I guess they're in a Power 5 conference now with the Big 10, or the Big 12. But Robbie, he was a great player, and he got drafted by the Packers. So
at least it was really great.
Yeah,
so, if you didn't, it might be a little bit harder to take.
It was great. He was a great dude. And he was clearly better than me once we got out there.
So in your decision to go to UC Davis, and I'm going to ask this question because in these conversations, I often find that there's a woman or a man that influences the decisions of people as they're making their. Was there someone in your life at that time you're like, I want to stay close?
Well, my sister was going to college in Santa Barbara at Westmont College, and so college was going to be an option, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do as far as a major. I was undeclared, and so really Sierra was probably the option I probably should have chose at that time. But you get enamored with, at that time, all the recruiting was in person.
But you didn't have a girlfriend that was influencing you?
No, nothing. Okay. Sports really was the driving piece. I only applied to 2 4-year colleges. I applied to San Diego State and I applied to UC Davis. And if I went to San Diego State, I was just going to go to college, and I hadn't really been to San Diego, but I had a teacher in high school that graduated from there. And she was saying how great it was, and she was an English teacher, Mrs. Bennett. And so I just thought, it'd be great to live in San Diego. Because remember, you couldn't look on the internet for anything. Yeah. You had to get a pamphlet from the college.
I remember.
Yeah. Or you looked up at San Diego in the encyclopedia, and they'd have pictures of San Diego. So, you'd have to drive 9 hours to get there.
To make a decision,
or they would send you literally a catalog. And so you'd make your decision to go to college if you didn't ever go there based on
you
the
could
catalog.
Fly, too. Yeah, we had planes back then.
We just never, I don't know when my first, I can't remember ever flying because my dad is really fearful of flying, so all our vacations were driving.
Yeah.
We drove to Yellowstone, we drove to, anywhere we went.
I didn't fly until I was in the military. Yeah. That was the first flight I ever got to take.
So sports was kind of, I still felt like I really wanted to try, and I was a pretty good basketball player in this area, and they were the best. They were Division II at that time, and but it was non-scholarship. They were in the same league as Chico State and Stanislaus and San Francisco, and it was Cal State Hayward. All those schools were non-scholarship Division II. And
what position were you playing?
I was, everybody at that time. It was kind of a passing game. The game. I was a forward guard. At 6'3". The game was, no shot clock, no 3-point line. It was, pass the ball 10 times. It was kind of a little Hoosiers.
Fundamentals.
Yeah, it was just a more patient game. But we had a really good team in high school. We won the last game we could play, which was the North State Championship. And I was good, probably the best player on that team. And so we got a little bit of publicity for that. And then so UC Davis got involved. But I went there my freshman year thinking I was a pretty good player and realized there's 22 and 23-year-olds here. And I was 17 when I started college. I was young.
Yeah.
I was a September birthday.
Body's still maturing.
Still maturing. I was 6'3", 170. And then 2 years later, when I was at Sierra, I was 6'3", 190. It was before the weight room was really, but it was just a kind of a maturing process for me. I went with one of my close friends from Roseville. He was a football player and he played football there. And so he and I roomed together and it was relatively close, but we had an apartment there. And it was a great year. I learned a lot. But I kind of learned that I really wasn't ready to live away from home and spend the money going to college when I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do.
And did you have aspirations of going to the next level after college?
The idea that you can play, at some point you realize you're not going to be, in the NBA. And I think it was more difficult to realize that then because there just wasn't as much information. There was literally one NBA game on Sundays. And then there was very little college basketball. UCLA was on, but it's not like you're watching Eastern Washington and some of these small majors playing. So the information wasn't out there. So you think you're pretty good and, you think, hey, I can do this. And I realized when I got there was just grown men and that was Division II. So I went for a year. I played, I was on the team, but I didn't play a lot, or I didn't play in any meaningful games because I was a freshman. And they had a kid named Preston Newmeyer, who was a really good player. He got drafted by the Kansas City Kings. It was the Kings at the time. And Preston was a year ahead of me in the same position. And I didn't take me long to figure out he was really good too.
And so were you humbled when you were going through that?
It was humbled and also a little bit surprised, because I never saw a Davis game. I never saw, anything like that. And so when you go there, you think you're pretty good coming out of high school, but it kind of hit me, man. There's guys that are 4 years older than me, and it was a rude awakening, but it was a good thing in that it kind of made me reassess what I wanted to do. And I realized I really wasn't ready to play at that level. If I wanted to play at that level, it would be best to go back to Sierra. And that's where I should have probably gone out of college because I was young. Like I said, I was 17. Young. So I went back. Coach Barry, Tom Barry was the coach there, and he had been the Placer men's coach. And so we competed in high school together, and he recruited me to go to Sierra, wanted me to go there. And he knew better for me than I knew for myself because he was 100% right.
A lot of coaches do.
Yeah, at that time.
You don't know until later.
No, but a year later, I'm there. And at that time, the NCAA rules were if you transfer from a 4-year to a JC, you have to sit out a year of that sport. So I thought about playing football because they had also recruited me, but I ended up playing golf at Sierra College because I had always enjoyed golf, but I always played baseball in high school. So I played on the Sierra golf team, which I learned George Godo was the coach, and I learned so much. And it was kind of got me really excited about playing golf. And then the next year I played basketball for Coach Barry, and I had a great experience, great year. It was perfect for me. And by then I was 20 years old. I was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. I knew I kind of wanted to be a teacher and a coach if I wasn't going to be able to play beyond high school.
So that teacher, let's start on the teacher side. Is this being influenced by your parents? Is that part of...
So my parents, it's funny because they always told me not to go into teaching because there wasn't any money at that time. Teachers were paid. This is the early 80s. This is like 81, 82, 83. And they just weren't paid very much. Administrators weren't paid very much. And they worked their tails off. And they were a great example for me. Like everything I know about hard work comes from seeing my parents work so hard. And they, though, said, hey, I wanted to be an attorney for about a quarter at Davis, and then I wanted to be a business major. Well, what was that? I don't know. So they kind of steered me away from teaching, as well as my sister, and she ended up becoming a teacher as well. But because money and jobs with Prop 13 going through, there just wasn't a great climate to go into education. But 3, 4, 5 years later, things were a little bit better once I got done with college. So I think if there was an influence, it's just seeing them. My dad, when he was a principal, he also coached the girls and boys basketball teams because it was a little school at that time, Penryn. But he was so like connected. That was his school. And the kids, he knew. You walk on campus, he knew every kid. My mom was a first grade teacher. Then she became principal at Green Hills. And there was a K through 4, I think, or K through 3. But her thing was she wanted to know every kid on campus. So the connection and the way that they approached their job and the I don't know, just the enjoyment or the fulfillment that they got, I think was a big motivator for me. I couldn't see myself as a elementary because then coaching became more important than teaching. I would, at some point I said, hey, I want to, be a high school coach.
How did that spark? Yeah. So what age do you think that interest sparked?
Well, after Sierra, I went down to Fresno. I got a scholarship at a small college called Fresno Pacific University. It's a bigger college now. And they gave out full scholarships, but the only reason I got it was my uncle was the superintendent of schools for Fresno County. He knew I was looking for a place to play basketball, and he knew the people at Fresno Pacific because they hired a lot of teachers from there. And so he said, you think about that? So I went down and I worked out with the team, and the coach was from Sacramento and offered me a full tuition scholarship. And at that time, it was kind of a private, expensive school. So I didn't have anybody else say anything. I said, sure. I didn't know where Fresno Pacific was until I drove to it. So as I'm there playing, there was a lot of teachers going to that college. At some point, I'm going, okay, am I good enough to play overseas, whatever that means, because you'd hear about that.
Still holding on to the
Still
dream.
thinking, that you could. But again, this is pre-3-point line. I joke with my players, and Donovan and Johnny might have said this. I said, I was a 3-point line away from being a really good player.
It was all 2. They're all worth 2, no matter.
No matter what.
Yeah, what year did the 3-point line come?
The year after I got out of college, 86. 86, 87.
You could have been a top scorer. We'll never know.
Well, and I was a good player, but at that time, if you took a 20-footer and missed, that was a bad shot.
Yeah, because there was no upside.
Your offenses run more like 15 to 18 feet away. There was a lot of, Indiana motion or UCLA high post stuff. Everything was cutting and screening, but it was all 15 to 18 footers. But I was a good shooter. But if I shot 30 or 40% from out there, you would try to shoot 40 or 50% from closer. But if the game would have been expanded and widened, I would have been a much better player.
If only.
Yeah. So that goes back to me being younger. Like my parents joked, or they said all the time, we wanted to not start you in school, but you wanted to go to school so bad. I think it was because they didn't want to pay for daycare. They just sent me to school, because there's probably a little truth to both. But the year after, they put a 3-point line in. I'm going, are you kidding me? It was, and that changed the game.
So let's go to when you graduate. And do you come back home to your parents, or? So
in the teaching program, you do 2 semesters. Once I graduated, then I had to go an extra year if I wanted to go to be a teacher, go through the credential program. And so I enjoyed Fresno, and I had made some really good friends. And so 3 of my buddies that we all graduated with, we moved out and moved into a apartment right next to each other, 2 apartments. So we were all, 3 of the 4 of us were going to be teachers. One of them was an accountant. And so David got a job, and he's working, and Daryl and I and Kevin were all going into our teacher ed programs. And I'm working at TGI Fridays as a server, and Daryl's working there, and I don't know where Kevin was working somewhere, but we just worked for a year, got through our teacher ed program, and I went to a middle school was the first semester, and Mr. Edwards was the master teacher, and the middle school was on the central side of Fresno. And it was real close to Fresno Pacific, but it was a very diverse middle school. That southern part of Fresno is a lot of Southeast Asian kids and a lot of Hispanic kids. And so I went over there as a student teacher, and Mr. Edwards just kind of opened my eyes to, he was an older teacher, to this is a different different type of education than I hadn't gone to a school like that. I'd gone to, Roseville High School in Rocklin that had some diversity, but not that much. But he said, hey, do you want to coach? And I said, sure, I'll coach anything. And he goes, you're going to coach the baseball team. I'd never coached before. I played baseball. He was out there for about a day. And then I was with these 8th grade kids coaching the baseball team.
How old were you at this time?
I was probably 23, 24. So this is 1984, 85.
Okay.
And are you single yet? Have you met
I'm single, no, just living the dream with 3 of my buddies.
Working at TGI Fridays.
Coaching 8th grade baseball.
8th grade baseball. And, one of the funniest things about that is Mr. Edwards, it's funny because now teaching in high school, nobody showers. But at that time, your grade, you had to come up and get a towel. And
I remember you had to shower.
You had to shower.
7th, 8th grade, it was like the most horrific thing when you went to junior high. You're like, oh, this is the year I have to shower with everybody.
Shower with other kids.
Yeah.
And it became, the kids would be playful, but after the shock wore off as a 7th grader, that there's 8th graders and 7th graders and, just the stuff, shenanigans that go along. But I'm like, okay, we're tying their grade. Oh yeah, this is for these kids. Some of them, that was their only shower. They may not go home and be able to because of a large family or their living conditions or whatever. So he saw it as a thing. Hey, and he would hand out, just different toiletries, toothpaste, and just different things. So that was my first experience. And I thought, okay, man, he's been here forever. You can make a difference at a school like this. So then fast forward to the next semester, I was actually doing student teaching, and I was at Clovis West High School. That's where I was placed. And it was, at that time, the Clovis schools were way more advanced athletically with their feeder programs and just how they did things. They put more money into their sports. And so I got a chance to student teach with Max Newberry, who was the football coach, was one of the most influential people that I'd been around. Stan Bledsoe was the baseball coach. Both were veteran coaches. Jim Farmer was the track coach. And he was my master teacher. And then Steve Mosier was the water polo coach. So these guys are all veteran guys. I'm in there, and I'm just there all day, and I'm teaching some classes. And it was the greatest experience for me because I just got to be around people with so much experience. The basketball coach was a guy named Steve Cleveland, but he taught social studies. And Steve ended up being the Fresno City coach, the BYU head coach, and then Fresno State's head coach. So he went on this college path, but he was the most influential person in terms of basketball when I was young and starting out. So fast forward in the spring, I'm done student teaching.
So hold on there. So would you consider them your mentors, or were you in an environment where you just got to soak it in? Because there's a difference where you have a mentor versus...
Yeah. So that's a great question, because during the day I got to soak it in. I was in an office. These guys all were running programs. They were veteran guys. I taught every period. I taught extra periods because they would want a period off. I would just do whatever they wanted me to do. But Max Newberry, the head football coach, he and I had a personal relationship. He was single, and he was probably 20 or so years older than me. And he was an ex-Marine, and he offensive lineman. He played at BYU, and he was this just big kind of a mountain of a man. And I coached freshman football and JV football once I got there, but he just made an impact on me. And he was just different than people that I knew. My dad was in the Army, but he wasn't a career person in the Army. But Max just was like a bigger than life guy.
And does he know the impact he has on you? Were you able to tell him that?
Yes. And there was a fork in the road where, as I was working at Clovis West, he pulled me aside after a football season, and he asked me, he said, hey, do you want to be a football coach? Do you want that to be your career? And he goes, I know you're into basketball, but you could be really good at this, and I will help you be there, or you can go to basketball. And at the time I was, kind of in a in-between thing, but Max has passed away since, and he passed away during COVID, and we had a ceremony for him, kind of a celebration of life. A year and a half after COVID, everything closed. He was like right at the beginning of COVID. And then it was great to see people that I worked with and just kind of put some closure on it. But he and I hung around together, and he was old enough that when I was single and he was single, we would look for a mother-daughter single.
Oh, what a setup.
Yeah. And he was like, my dad for all intents and purposes. When he'd come into TGI Fridays,
my gosh.
he was, we were both single, and that was our thing, was we would go hang out, and the perfect people to meet would be the mom and the daughter.
There's an After Dark podcast here.
Or two daughter, Dare, whatever your friends' names are, looking for. So, question, were some of the things to the mentor aspect, what were some of the things so you're in your 20s, you're teaching, you're coaching, you're in a new diverse, situation. So what were some of those things that you were soaking in? What were you learning from them, or anything that you kind of held on to? They opened your eyes at that point too?
Well, with Mr. Edwards, it was the thing that I respected then, but I even respected more as I got into teaching, was he showed up every day. Mm-hmm. And he was the only PE teacher at Sunnyside Middle School. And he showed up there for 30 plus years. That's where he was the guy. And in middle school has its own dynamics with the age group, but he showed up every day for these kids, and that made an impact on me, because he could have gone to an easier setting in terms of, just daily activities and the things that he was called on to do. Sometimes he went above and beyond, whether it was bringing clothes or bringing, items to kids that he knew were in need. But that was his thing. And I thought, I remember thinking, man, this is a tough job, but like, he's there every day. And like I said, down the road, I even respected it more. And he finished there a few years later, he retired. When I was at Clovis West, it was the time and the effort that all of these head coaches put into their programs, and their work ethic was something unusual. And Clovis sports at that time were way above the Fresno Unified sports. Fresno Unified had 6 schools and Clovis had 2. But Clovis Unified started their sports programs in the 4th grade, and they had school teams in elementary and middle school. So they had tackle football for their elementary school team in 4th grade.
It was a pipeline.
There's a pipeline, and the superintendent was a gentleman named Dr. Buchanan, and he was the only superintendent at that time that Clovis had ever had. And he was an older gentleman at that time, but he loved sports, and he felt sports was part of the educational experience. Mm-hmm. It was as important as academics. It was it was just part of what kids should be learning in all the lessons. And so Dr. Buchanan was instrumental in creating this system that connected kids early on to their schools. And then the elementaries all fed to one middle school, and then the middle school went to one high school. And so that was the red unit and the blue unit. The blue unit was Clovis. So the coaches that I was around, they were knowledgeable, but I really didn't know who was and who wasn't. Mm-hmm. But their commitment to their jobs and to the kids and the impact that they had, it was a pretty dynamic setting to start out in,
So
I was fortunate.
Yeah. So you're a young man, you're in your early 20s. At what age it's an interesting question, because you can look back now and where you're at in your career and the passion you have for the kids and seeing kids do well. Where does that balance with wanting to be in education and wanting to be in sports and saying, I can make a difference in the kid's life? Where does that start? How does that get going?
Well, I think seeing my dad and the impact that he had, because Penryn at that time, there was he put a lot into his job, whether it's bringing kids home and, in the summer and having them play at our house or taking kids out to lunch. We'd go to summer school at Penryn. So seeing what my dad put in to his kids and in coaching, when I was young, I'd go to all the games. And then watching him coach and just seeing the connection that he had, I think was a big influence. The other piece that I think was pretty influential was my high school coach was Paul Gonzalez. And he still lives in Roseville, and he was in education and coaching 40 something years, even after he retired. His son, David, is the coach at Bella Vista. and he's been helping David, and he's in his late 70s, early 80s. But Coach Gonzalez took all of us in, and we were, part of who he was and part of his family. And again, you don't really know any different because that's just what the path you're going down. And us being a pretty good team created a bigger connection. But Coach Gonzalez and what he did in his career, Coach Jellison was our football coach. Coach Fisher was our baseball coach. All three of them, they were really good men that loved what they did. And how that kind of guided me into being a teacher. I think and coach, there's all these little influences. And there was a time, like my roommate, he's Irish, he got to play professionally in Ireland because he had dual citizenship. And I'm going, dang, man, that would be fun to go play over there because I was a better player than him. And I hope he's listening. So he got to play, but to be honest, I wanted to start making money and I want to start a career because I just didn't really want to fool around. I just wanted to get a teaching job and coach. And the student teaching experience around those guys, that the passion they had, the things that they did for kids that aren't really X's and O's. It's just doing things with them and for them. It was as good of an example, I think, for a young coach or a young teacher that I could have been and put in. I was put in a great situation to be around these guys, and it ended up getting a job there and moving on from there. So
I want to be sensitive to time. We have about 20, 25 minutes. So I want to bring us up to how you got to coaching at Rocklin, because I want to spend some time there. So Can you kind of walk us through that career and how you got to being the coach at Rocklin?
So I was the head coach at a school called Fresno High, and I got that job in 1990. So I was at Clovis West for 4 years, coached lower levels, and then I was Coach Vance Wahlberg, who was recently named the head coach at Fresno State 2 days ago from Clovis West. He's back at Clovis West. I got the head job at Fresno High. I was 27 years old, and Fresno High is right in downtown Fresno, very inner city school, and I loved my experience there. We had gotten to be a really good team after 2 or 3 years. I didn't come up here very often, and my parents said, hey, they passed a bond. They're going to build a high school in Rocklin. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. Just wasn't that. I was happy with what I was doing. Mm-hmm. Loved the kids I was working with. I was teaching math at the time. I have a math add-on credential and some PE, but I didn't plan to go anywhere. Well, then they kept fast forwarding this thing, and then my dad's like, hey, that's going to be open in the fall of 93. You might think about applying. That was maybe a year or so earlier. Well, in the fall of 92, my sister's husband, Jake, passed away suddenly. Mm-hmm. He was a firefighter. Thought he had strep throat. He got diagnosed with leukemia, and he passed away in the fall of 92. It had a real devastating effect on my sister and my parents, because my dad was closer to Jake probably at that time because he saw Jake. Mm. So I kind of had a sense that it'd be good if I got back there. There was just some dynamics going on that I felt like I was out of touch with. And so that kind of motivated me to apply for the job, to get back up in that area, to just be around more. And I applied, and Phil Spears was the principal. They were looking for whatever they were looking for, and I got the job.
Head coach basketball.
So you've been the original Rocklin High coach the whole entire time.
Yes, and the interesting piece was we started with just ninth graders. Mm. So when the high school opened up, it was just ninth graders in 93, 94. So I went from being the varsity coach at Fresno High to going back and working with 14, 15-year-olds, which was a little bit more challenging than I thought it would be. Well, then we added a class every year, and we added teachers and coaches. And so our first regular varsity was 96, 97 when we had a full high school. So our graduating class was 97.
So 97. So parallel path. You're still single, or have you met your wife?
No, I met my wife in, actually went right. I got in the spring of 89, spring of 89. Let's see, spring of 90, because we got married in.
Better get this right.
Yeah, I was going to say, she's listening. She's listening. We felt it. We saw your face.
Well, we just celebrated our 34th wedding anniversary on
congrats.
Sunday.
Oh,
Sunday.
wow. Congratulations.
So we got married in April 7th, 1990. So we met in 89 because we got married a year after. So I got the job at Fresno High after we got married, and she would tell you, I didn't know I was marrying a basketball coach. I was an assistant coach, and I was doing some other assistant stuff. I wasn't putting the time in that I did once I got the job. So we got married in spring of 90. I went to Fresno High, and so we came up. We didn't have kids for a number of years, so we both came up to Rocklin. She actually wanted to come to Rocklin. She's from Fresno, but was kind of tired of living there. She always enjoyed coming up to this area, and she was excited about moving out of that area. She was still in college. She was going to Fresno State, and she ended up coming up and then graduating from Sac State the following year.
Okay.
So we were young.
Came with you.
She was, I think, I was 30 when I got the job at Rocklin, and she was 24, I think, when I got the job, for 24, 25.
Wow.
So 97. So I moved to Rocklin, I don't know, so probably 2014, Donovan and Jonathan, and Cutts was the coach at the time. There was a break, and we'll get to that. But Johnny came in, and then as Donovan was coming in, kept hearing this name, Coach Taylor, and absolute legend in the Rocklin, Northern California area. But you don't get to where you're at today by the snap of a finger. So when you came in 97, are you guys winning? Are you super successful? Is it starting off like the story career?
The freshman year was certainly challenging. Then JVs, we had a really good team because nobody was playing varsity as a sophomore. And so we won the championship in JVs. And I tried to kind of remind the parents that, okay, we won the championship, but we have all of our players, where the other teams all have sophomores and freshmen probably playing up. So our junior year, we were thrown right into the SFL. And Folsom and Ponderosa at the time were ranked 1 and 2 in the Sacramento area. And we only won one game. We went 1-9. But we competed. We had all sophomores and juniors on the team. We competed. And then the next year we were competitive. We had a winning record, and we won a first round playoff game, and then lost to Sonora in the second round of that first senior class. But they were great kids. We got it going pretty quickly, and really the success that we had was, number one, we were the only school in town. So we started our Little Thunder program, which I got from Clovis West. We started summer camps. We started just having opportunities for kids in the community to just come into our gym for different activities.
And so where does your basketball philosophy at this time, where is it stemming from? So I know you played, you had these coaches. Like, how are you putting your program and your stamp on
Well,
on
it was Bobby Knight motion offense. Most high schools were running 3 out, 2 in motion at the time in the 80s and then into the 90s. Coach Cleveland was a UCLA high post guy, which that was kind of, you were in two sides. If you had a big guy, you ran UCLA high post. If you had more guard, 4 or 5 guards, you ran motion offense, passing game, passing cut. So that's where we were, man-to-man defense. It was very much a half court. Everybody's style of play was a lot slower, and it was, just fundamentals and patience. And I want to say, I don't believe there was a shot clock at that time. I don't know when the high school shot clock came in. At some point.
Were you a student of the game? Were you?
Yeah, I think as much as, at that time as you could be, because this is not a lot on the internet at that time. You'd go to clinics. When I was young, every summer we would work the Fresno State camp, and I went to Pepperdine camp, and you just go to work to be around coaches. And there were a lot more coaching clinics, in-person clinics at that time. There was a big Nike clinic every year in Vegas that everybody went to, thousands of coaches. And so you'd just go to learn. There was South Tahoe had a big clinic at that time. Then they'd get the best coaches in the country. So I tried to be, and especially starting out a program, I was kind of all in. And my wife, and we didn't have kids. She was working at Roseville Telephone after she got out of college, she got a really good job there. And so we were just kind of, in the Rocklin mode, and the high school was a big part of our life. So
when you think back then, you're new coach, new program, you're learning, you're going to have some successes, ups and downs, and we'll get to the current period, but let's call it during that first 5 years. When you're going through, losing streak or bad season, bad games, I'm sure parents aren't that much different. Maybe people are telling you should go left instead of going right. Do you ever doubt what you're doing at that time? Not now, but back then.
Well, the one thing that was different back then is there were less voices for kids. So there weren't AAU teams. There weren't trainers. There weren't specialists that were getting the kids time and attention outside of the high school program. So in all sports, Little League Baseball, there was that, but there wasn't even a tackle football program at that time. So the high school coaches' voices meant more than they do now. Now there's more voices. And so we had a great support group, and I'd say the first senior class, we probably won 20 games or something, but we started the next year, the year after that class, we got to the section finals, played in Arco Arena.
So you had success right
So
we
kind of made a later season run, and I felt like the kids were kind of getting it. And we had good players, but not great. Like we didn't have a marquee player. We had a kid named Leo Cravey that was a really good player that went to Sac State, but after Sierra. But we upset Foothill. They were the number 1 seed, and we finished second or third in league. But we got, on a buzzer beater, we got to go to Arco Arena, and we played Del Oro for the 3rd time. And they beat us the 3rd time. And people say, it's hard to beat a team 3 times. And I always say, unless you're a lot better than that, because then a kid named Donovan Nemo, and I see Donovan around. Donovan hit 6 threes, and he was a heck of a player. And we thought, it's going to be hard to shoot in Arco. Kids are going to be nervous. Not Donovan. Donovan Nemo lit us up. And we played them tough. It was a relatively close game, but that kind of justified, I think, because I would say the bigger challenges was when the kids were younger, and I think they felt like, there's a varsity coach came in, he's maybe a little too intense, or his expectations are too high. But I told the kids from the beginning that, hey, I'm going to coach you. I'm not, whether you're a freshman, sophomore, we're going to teach a system, and we're going to, teach offense and defense. And I think the parents a little early on, they didn't know what to expect. For many of them, it was their first kid in high school sports. And so once we started winning, and then in 2001, 2 years later, the next year we had a better team. We finished second to Del Oro, made a couple playoff games. We won a couple playoff games, but then the 3rd year after, so this would have been 2000, 2001, we win the section championship, we win the league, we went 9-1 and got to the NorCal semifinals and lose to St. Francis in overtime. And they play for the state championship. They win one more game, they're in the state championship. So by year 4 of our 4th senior class, 2001, we were pretty darn good. That's when we had Brett Ost and Jason Yocklich, and a kid named Adam Snyder was a junior, and Chris Jones, and Adrian Harris was a junior, Brett Swartz, Matt Yocklich was a junior. We had a heck of a team.
So you have, at this time then, your confidence in your schemes and the offenses you're running, the defense, you're locked in. You're not going to be influenced.
Not, you know what? More so, I think basketball and other sports too, but at that time there were these trends that are going on, and we tried to copy what the college coaches were doing. And there were some colleges at that time, there were less colleges that were good. And Coach K at Duke, that's been the program that I always admired the most. But it was UCLA, and it was Duke, and it was Kansas, and it was Kentucky, and it was Indiana. And these programs all kind of did similar things, and we'd go to clinics and watch those coaches speak and talk about how they teach things, and then that's what we all did. So really it came down to we were all doing the same things. It was just who had better players.
Yeah. Got it.
And our players really bought in, and we had some kids that played Division I sports and other sports. We had some Division II and Division I basketball players that went to JCs and went Division I. So we had really good players, but they were all bought in.
So we fast forward, you take a little bit of a break. You have success. I'm sure you have some off seasons. I want to get closer to where we're at now. You take a little bit of a break. How many years did you take off?
6 years.
6 years.
So my son was a 8th grader and my daughter was a 6th grader.
And any specific reason why you took the break?
After we
Is this from coaching and teaching,
no,
or just coaching?
I still taught.
Got it.
Yeah,
okay.
the whole
So
time.
break from coaching.
My wife wouldn't let me quit working. So in 2009, and this is a little more information maybe than most people know. When we lost the state championship, it took me a number of months to get over it. Usually we take a break of 3 or 4 weeks. Spring break comes and we go back and we start over. And I really wanted to quit coaching at that time because I thought we were the better team physically. And I don't think that I personally or we did a very good job putting the kids in a position to win the biggest game of their lives and of our lives. And it was just a weird experience getting to that place and the pressure that you felt when we had the best player in the area who was going to UCLA. And it was like I was coaching not to lose and we end up losing. And so I just went through this period of time where I just didn't, I was going to quit coaching, and I talked to my wife about it, and I didn't talk to any of the kids. Because there's always a natural break. Well, then it got to be April and May when we were supposed to get restarted. We had another good team coming back. We had Cody Kale and Tony Williams and Justin Soria. We had some really good players coming back, but I just couldn't get excited about coaching. I was just devastated. And I also I felt kind of mad at myself. I just felt like, we were, I want to say 2 for 23 from 3-point line. So that was really the statistic that stuck out. We outplayed them in every other area. We just didn't shoot very well. But as a coach, you kind of own it, and I'm thinking I'll never have this chance and these kids will never have this chance again. So we blew it. So then we got ready for the summer, and that summer I talked to the coaches in the spring, and I said, I don't know if I want to keep coaching. I said, I'm going to have you guys do a lot of the summer stuff, and I'm going to be around, but I just can't get back on the sideline and start moving forward. It was just in a weird place.
So was there a sense when going back and seeing the coaches from all of the community of coaches, was there a sense of embarrassment? Like, I haven't heard this story. So you're talking about it. You don't want to get back in front of everybody. You have to see everybody again.
Yeah, there was certainly a disappointment. And they may not have, like, people in the community were so supportive. I mean, everybody was just excited that we got there. But I knew we should have won. And you have a whole week to prepare, and it was the first time we'd gone through this, and it was like, how do we get to where we're peaking at the game time? And I think that everybody, including our players, probably expected to win, but this was a team from LA that we had lost to. So we only lost 3 games that year. We lost to Eisenhower in the Max Preps Classic, which was the biggest tournament in California at the time, in the open division. And we lost to them by 7 points in the winter. So we knew we were going to get, but we didn't feel, we thought we were better. So it was kind of like, I got to put everything into it again. I don't know if I have anything left emotionally.
I would imagine, this is the biggest spotlight, but I would imagine after every big game, every time you go to dinner, every time you go out, every new conversation you have, it's picking at that scab. And as supportive as everybody is, you have to have that conversation all over and say, thank you, I appreciate it.
And that's what you do, and you do appreciate it, but it's kind of like it's a little hurtful, and it brings it back. So at some point, you got to flip the page. You got to move on. Well, as the summer went on, we had great kids. Jackson Cummings was an incredible kid on that team. So we had all these kids that also lost the year before. Mm-hmm. And at some point, I'm like, okay, why is this about how I'm feeling? And I got to help these kids. And I said, we got a senior class who are all in. They're as hurting as much as I am, but they're out there playing. So at some point in the summer, I started coming to more games, but I was having the assistant coach's coach, and I was just trying to be around the kids. And so then in the fall, and this is a true story, and I don't think my wife will mind if I share it. We were in August, and that's kind of when we take our family vacation. And she looked at me and she said, I don't want to be married to a basketball coach anymore. And that was hurtful. It was the first time she'd ever said anything like that. And I think she saw how much it took out of me that previous year and how I struggled in the summer. And she'd never seen that. I'd always been excited.
And I imagine it takes away from the family too.
It did,
like you
because I wasn't
present.
present. Yeah, I wasn't present. So it was after our vacation, and she knew I just wasn't the same person, and I didn't know it. And the kids were young; they were in 7th grade at that time, and fifth grade. But she just said that point blank, and so then we had this kind of come to Jesus talk, for a lack of a better term. And kind of reality hit me right in the face. And the whole thing was, I'm not around enough. I was missing my own kids' activities. Ashley was in dance. Nick was in every sport. I was trying to be present, but I wasn't. When I was there, I was, just thinking or there. I was there part of the time. I would leave my son's 7th grade game his year to go to my practice. So he was playing at Granite Oaks. So I'd leave. I couldn't even watch my son play, and my wife would be sitting in the stands, and there was just this resentment that built up, and it was basketball was taken away from our family. So in August, she and I talked, and I said, you know what, we have a great group of kids. Let me coach this last year, and I will step away. And so that was our deal. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't even tell our coaches. I didn't tell any players. In about September, David Bills was the AD at that time. And I went to David and I told him, I said, hey, this is what is happening. And we had a good team coming back. Everybody was excited about it. I said, but I don't want to tell any of the players because I don't want it to be a distraction. I want them to just play their season. It's not going to be it's not like I'm leaving the school. I'm just going to step away from coaching. So fast forward another month, we're getting ready for the season. And I get, our principal at the time was a guy named Mike Garrison. He wants to have this meeting because he's concerned with kids that had moved into the Rocklin area. So, and literally moved in. Well, we go through this process and he's, he insinuated as if I coerced kids into moving into Rocklin, which was 100% false. I mean, these kids literally, families moved in, and they didn't move in 1 year. They moved in when they were sophomores or juniors, and they had siblings. Cody had 4 other siblings go to Rocklin High. And so anyway, I felt like that they all knew I was going to quit coaching. And I had talked to David, and I told them the same thing. But I also had this sense like, what the heck am I doing this for? I mean, I built a really good program. Parents and kids want to be here. They've literally moved in. No one sat out like they do now. Nobody just transferred schools. People moved into our community. And part of it was to play basketball, but also it was to play basketball with Brendan. That was the other piece. His senior year, these kids wanted to come in to get exposure because we had college scouts in our gym in the fall. We had them all the time in our gym. So I knew it was the right time because I have an administration that's not saying it, but they're acting as if I've done something wrong by getting these kids here.
And people are talking.
Yeah, and people are resentful but again, they moved into our community. They didn't transfer schools. They all lived within our residence. Yeah. And I'm thinking, hey, I'm doing a great job. I'm building a program. People are coming in. And there was just this underlying sense. And so I knew they knew I was going to quit. They insinuated this and that, but there was nothing of any substance or no truth. And so I went the whole year and I never told the kids anything about it. And I didn't tell the coaches until the season was over. And the only people that knew were myself and our administration and my wife. I didn't even tell my kids. So when the year ended, I think that if I were to guess, somebody within that administrative group said, hey, he's going to step down. Well, then I didn't say anything about it. And I didn't, at the awards banquet, people are like wondering, but I didn't want to make it about me. I just wanted to have an awards banquet. We had a great year. We finished second in the league to Wood Creek, and Wood Creek they ended up playing in the state championship that year. And then we won 2 playoff games, and we played at St. Francis and lost by 1 point at St. Francis, or we would have gone to the North section or North State Finals. So then a little bit of time passed, and then I brought the kids in, and I, told them what the situation was. And I was very honest with them that I wasn't ready. And the way I looked at it, I didn't want to only see my kids and my wife half the time. Yeah. And I just couldn't bear, I couldn't think, hey, I should just stay and coach basketball and lose my family. It just wasn't worth it. And it seemed like a pretty easy decision at the time, but other people made it a bigger deal than I thought it was. And part of it was because we had all this success, and they're like, how could you not want to coach? You're so successful. Well, sit in my seat, and the pressure that you feel
depends.
Is like when we would win, people would go, oh yeah, you guys won. If we'd lose, well, why'd you guys lose? Well, because the other team was trying to win too. They have good players. We have good players, but that's why they keep score.
50-50 here.
But we were, we had, I think 28, 29 wins my last year. And it was like I had the sense that was disappointing to people because we had 32 the year before and played in the state championship. Well, it's hard to get to the state championship.
It's hard to get there, yeah.
And a lot of pressure.
I would imagine as you make that transition out, one, the talk and the rumors just had to be out of control. Mm-hmm. Who knows what got back to you, but I'm sure it was all there.
Some of the things got back, and it was so there was some ulterior motives with the administration at that time. There was some personal, in my opinion, some jealousy and some just kind of power dynamics. Like there were people on our campus that didn't like how popular our program was.
Oh yeah, anytime someone's winning.
How popular I was, because the principal would have liked to have been a basketball coach, but he wasn't. And there was just a weird dynamic. And this was a person who was a very close friend of mine because he coached on our staff, and we had a lot of personal time together for years. But the dynamic changed when they became administrators. And it was, I don't know, it was just a weird, to this day, there's never been an honest conversation because I just don't have any contact with those folks. But it was disheartening because I tried to be honest and transparent, but it wasn't enough for people. Like they couldn't understand that I was burnt. I was fried.
Decision for you.
It was, and when I brought my family up, I think people would maybe, oh yeah, you've been doing it for so long. You don't know my wife. My wife, our family is everything, and I'm part of that. She could care less about basketball, which is fine. Mm-hmm. And it was an easy thing for me to step away, and it was also from a health and mental standpoint, it was by far the best thing I could have ever done. Because I wouldn't have been able to keep coaching. I would have burned out. I would have been, a divorced parent, burning the candle on both ends. Yeah. And I wouldn't have been very effective without taking a break. And to be honest, I was fine just being done coaching, and teaching became more fun. I was a department chair, and I went back to school and started taking some classes. And so it was great to take a break.
So we have about 15 minutes left. So I want to dive into a few questions. During that time, did you watch those 6 years? Did you watch the program? Did you stay close? Did you try to stay away from giving advice?
Initially, they struggled to get, when they opened the job up, they struggled to get a lot of candidates with experience because there wasn't a teaching position attached. Mm. And so they hired a person who hadn't really coached in high school, but was more in the AAU world. And so I helped in the transition in terms of showing him where everything is and just giving him information and just stuff. But once it started, first he didn't really want help. He was from a different environment, and I think came in thinking, hey, I'm going to do things my way. And I just needed to step away 100%, or I probably wouldn't be able to step away.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be a distraction but I still taught the class, and I taught PE, and so I stayed connected to the kids that were in our program because I'd see them every day or every other day.
Yeah.
And that was difficult because things didn't go well, especially the second year. The first year, we had a lot of returning guys. We had a kid named Andre Jones, who's a coach at Western Sierra Collegiate Academy. And Andre played at San Francisco State for 4 years, was a great player. And Kyle Peterson was a really good player coming back. And so we had some kids coming back, and they were okay. They were pretty good.
Talent got them through.
But the second year, things just kind of fell off the cliff. And that was hard to watch because it was 17 years, I think, that I put in to build it to a place. And then
I bet that was
he came
really
in
hard.
and changed all the offense, the defense, became more of a half-court type team. And the kids, I think, struggled with buying into something that, wasn't effective. And so that was difficult. It was difficult that second year to watch. But in the meantime, I coached baseball. I managed my son's baseball team. We won the Top of the Rock for seniors, and it was really fun because I got to go be in a different place. I managed a baseball team for 2 years, and my daughter was into competitive dance and had a lot of joy with those experiences.
Yeah, you wouldn't trade those years for anything.
And then he stepped away after 2 years, and then Casey came in, and now it was really easy for me to be supportive and helpful in as much as he wanted. He was one of my favorite players, and there's 2 or 3 players that are probably the smartest, like cerebral players that I've coached, and Casey was one of them. And he played at Yuba and then played at Stanislaus State, and then was working on his degree, thought he might want to go into teaching, and he was a really good fit in terms of culture and just the type of person he was. He didn't have a lot of coaching experience. He had some at Del Oro, maybe 1 or 2 years as a lower level coach, but he was really a good fit as a person.
So let's fast forward. What brings you back after 6 years?
So Casey had it going a little bit, and then he got married and was ready to start a family. Wife had a baby, and then that summer he just, I think, realized there was some pressures that maybe he wasn't anticipating with life and just with expectations. So he chose to step away. And it wasn't something that I was even thinking about. But that same spring that Casey stepped away, Dave Stewart, who's the principal now, became the principal. He was the the athletic director, vice principal. So he was my JV coach for a number of years. He was also a varsity assistant. And then he and I were friends at Sierra College in 81 to 83. We hung out together. So that he was in UPS, was his career. And then he got out of UPS and was an educator and started late. So when Dave stepped into that role, there was a vacancy, and I really wasn't interested in coaching anymore. I'd kind of, after a couple of years, really gotten to enjoy some free time. But I watched a lot more games, and I was around the coaches, and it was really a comfortable place to be. I was running our AAU program. I always kept that going, our Rocktown Ballers program. And so those kids were feeding into the high school. But the class that was juniors was going to be seniors. I coached in 8th grade, and it was my daughter's class also. And so I knew a lot of the kids because they'd be over, and there were some great kids in that class. So Dave and I talked, and he goes, hey, would you be interested in getting back in coaching? I said, I hadn't really thought much about it. I figured Casey would get his credential and coach for 20 years. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 2 years, and then we'll cross that bridge again. How's that? And he's like, that'd be great.
And wife supportive?
Wife was supportive because the kids, now Nick was in college. He was at Nevada. Ashley was going to be a senior. She, to be honest, she'll say, yeah, you were bored. Like you weren't doing, you were around too much.
Get a hobby.
They wanted you to do
I played
something.
golf, I fished, but I was around the house too much. So she was supportive of it because of where the kids were. And Ashley was really excited about it because her friends, I knew a lot of the kids, and she was a dancer. And so Trace O'Brien and Nick Oler, some of these kids that I coached in 8th grade, they were going to be seniors. I thought, and Matt Dennis, some of these kids. So I said, okay, I'm going to do it. And I didn't do it thinking I'd be doing it for a number of years. I wanted to kind of get things stabilized and back and moving in a positive direction, and then just see where it's at. So I think year 3 or 4, we had it really going when Donovan and Andre were juniors. We had a really good team, but then we took that next step in 2019-20. I think that was year 4.
Yeah, right in COVID.
We won the championship, got a deep run in the playoffs, and COVID hits. So that kind of halted everything, and we had a makeshift season.
Yeah.
Well, coming out of that, everybody kind of was re-energized a little bit just because we hadn't done so much, didn't done very much. And, but our program, and I think took a bigger hit. The basketball in general during COVID, we were the last teams to start playing, and we played a month and a half, but all the other sports were playing. So the following year, we didn't have hardly a senior class because they were all tied into other sports. They didn't play basketball their junior year if they were a multi-sport kid. So because baseball was going on and football was going on. So that next year coming out, I had a lot of young players. We had a number of sophomores, 3 or 4 sophomores. We had a couple freshmen on the team, and we took our lumps. But knowing that we could get this thing back going. So the kids that were sophomores the year after COVID were seniors this year, 3 years. And the fruits of our labor really paid off.
And how far did you go this year?
Well, this year it was the first time that we had won an outright championship since Folsom came in the league. So we beat Folsom twice, and that we were 8-2 in league. We lost to DO and lost to Oak Ridge, but we beat Folsom twice and Whitney twice, split with Del Oro. So we won our league. 2019-20, we shared the title with Folsom because we split with them. Well, then we got pushed up to Division I because they have new rules in the section. So we won 2 games in the section playoffs Division I, beating Sheldon, which was a huge win for us because we had never beaten them before. And then we lost to Lincoln of Stockton, who ended up losing to Modesto Christian. So we got to the 3rd round. We got to the Final 4 of Division I, which we've never really... Like when we went to the state championship, it was Division II because the rules were different on where you played.
So phenomenal year. You've built it back. So I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions and you jump in as well. So interest of time, we're going to go fast.
Sure.
1920 team, 23-24. Who wins in a head-up?
You would ask that question. Is that Donovan's question?
No, it's his dad's question.
Yeah. I think it's a really, they're similar teams in that they had a really effective big, right? We have Mark this year, and we had Andre. So those were really effective. The point guards are similar, but Josiah's a sophomore. We had some good wings. We had Canyon Rice and Donovan Lopez. So they're really similar teams. The thing that I think that team was a little bigger and stronger physically, the 2019-20 team. The 2023-24 still has a lot of young players. We started 3 seniors, but we had a lot of younger players playing, where 2019-20 was, other than maybe Emmanuel, I think, played, and Nick played a lot. Most of the core guys were seniors, though.
This is the greatest political answer I've ever heard.
This is really good.
Because the
Sounds like
23, 24 are still on our campus, and I love them.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it would be, if I were going to set the spread, it would be 3 points or less either way.
I love it.
It might be a pick'em game.
That's a really good
we're going to have to get the keys on a Thursday night.
Yeah.
That's a really good answer.
It was a great answer. Okay, so some questions around, and again, we're going to go rapid fire. What's more difficult, parents or kids?
Ooh.
I think a wise coach once said that the best coaching job was at an orphanage. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I heard that at a clinic back in the 80s when that might have been a little more politically correct to say.
That.
It was talking to college coaches, talking to high school coaches, and it might have been Coach Knight, but it was somebody that said something like that.
Yeah, that answers the question.
But I would say, in all honesty, I have a lot of friends that are in coaching. They're all over the area, and they complain all the time about parents. Mm-hmm. And I would say that Rocklin is different than that. And we've had, and part of it is I expect to have everybody not be happy all the time. That's okay. I've had kids that played sports. So Rocklin, I have always felt supported in general. There's been, specific things, but you can't please everybody. You work as hard as you can. You try to do the best you can, but you've been in our parent meetings. I say we make mistakes. Yeah. There's games that afterwards I'm going, there was no rhythm and flow. What are we doing with substitutions? And I give my assistant coaches a lot of responsibility in terms of helping sub, and they're looking for specific things, and they can sub people in. And but I've always felt fortunate, and I'm not saying that other than I really believe it, that we have great parents, and hopefully they at least appreciate the work that we do, even though we may not always do it well, but we're at least working hard at it.
Yeah, I think I have two very specific memories. One was from your coaches' meetings, and I'm paraphrasing of, before you come talk to me, have your kid come talk to me. And I remember, Donovan, you brought him up as a junior or a sophomore, and he's like, I don't want to do this. And I was like, well, I can't have this conversation. And he went and talked to you, and I went back. It was good. It was the right decision for him, but he had to have the conversation. And the second one is, it was early in his freshman year, and I yelled something from the stands, and he told me when I go, if I hear you again, don't come to my games. And I was like, well, that's the last time you'll ever hear me.
I was going to say, it would be real awkward if you were one of those parents you're asking about, so I was assuming that you were.
Well, and like I always tell the parents, it's confusing for kids. Mm-hmm. They know their parents' voice, but if they're listening to their parents and not their coaches, they're just not going to be as effective. And the big piece with communicating with kids is a big picture thing. It's you're going to have to talk to your boss. And most kids are uncomfortable, but once you have conversations, they're way more comfortable. Mm-hmm. And I tell the kids all the time, if I've had 100 conversations, 98 of the kids left there going, man, this was great. This was way easier. This is cool. We may agree to disagree, but we all are out there. And so teaching kids, especially in the day of technology, where when I say, hey, go talk to your teacher, they email them. That's not talking.
Yeah.
Go have a conversation, and they don't even talk to each other. They text each other. So they can have 3 conversations at the same time texting, and that's more effective, but they don't know how to talk. And,
Agree.
So it's just a thing to get them. And I think it also makes you seem more human to them when you have that conversation and they realize, wow, he cares, or all right, and now I know, I get where they're coming from, or maybe I need to do this better or that better. Mm-hmm. But it's part of the connective piece, I think, getting kids to have conversations with adults.
Yeah.
So biggest piece of advice for the parents coming into your program?
One is enjoy it because it's going to go fast.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think sometimes parents, they focus so much on the future. And it's a goal to get a scholarship, or, my kid needs to do this in order to get this, that they miss the moment. They miss the time that they're having these experiences. And if they're missing it, I think that sometimes kind of carries down to the kids, that the kids are looking ahead, or they're invested so much. They've spent so much money on trainers and this and that They want to return. So I would just say enjoy the time, and then try to step back and allow your child to fail in order to grow. And it's okay, because we're going to be there to pick them up. But we're going to let them hit the ground. Don't be there to catch them.
Yeah.
And some of the growth that you see in kids from their freshman to senior year, if as long as they're around people that care and the people that are competent, which I think that we are, it's going to be okay. Even though around, as you go through it, not everything's going to be perfect. But I just allow your kids to experience it and be there to support them and have fun and enjoy it, because it happens so fast. It's gone.
Yeah, I would say, coming from the parent standpoint, the piece of advice, unsolicited advice that I'm going to give right now is it's as much of an experience for the parents and the community if you can engage with the other families. You have the dinners, you have the nights out when you're going on the trips, and you enjoy that without focusing so much on, to your point, on the bigger picture. Yeah, you have to, there's always going to be pushing, but
Sure.
We still have the Rocklin Hoops text group that we still text from the parents, from all of those guys. We still go on trips, and all of our boys are still friends, and all of us still go. We'll go to your golf tournament. So there's just this community that can be built if you just take a breath and enjoy the experience from the parents, that there's so much more than just the game that is happening that people miss out on.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, because the people that we're closest with in our adult friend groups now are parents of my son's closest friends that he went to college with and that he played high school sports with. And I grew up in this area, but most of my friends, they're either single and divorced, or they got, their families. And I see 2 or 3 of my high school friends. But I'm friends with my kids' friends' parents. Those are our closest friends. And so that has always connected us. The college experience connected us, or the Rocklin baseball. My wife is friends with the families of the dance moms. They still have a dance mom group. So I haven't really thought of it that way, is that impact, it allows you to enjoy the experience more, because you're getting something out of that experience as well.
Oh, and there's no doubt we're very similar to the kids, that every year that goes by, our team was the best that ever played.
Oh my gosh.
It would be, the reality is they're 4 years younger. And so that might impact a little bit, but the 2019-20 team, they're a tough group.
Well, no, I'm just saying, but it's just like, I was my best when I was 20, right? Every year that goes by in my mind. But that's years.
That's why those guys think they're better than the 23-24 team.
But those years for the parents, the stories get bigger. They get funnier. They get, I remember Coach Taylor did this, or I remember the kids were 2 minutes late.
I remember when Donovan hit the shot at Pleasant Valley High School.
Absolutely.
With about 3 seconds left, Corey Gold goes baseline, penetrates. Donovan's a junior, rises, hits a 3. We're down 2 at the time. Playing in the North State playoffs, one of the biggest shots anybody ever made, and it was just going about his business.
It was incredible, and that team came back from 10 or 12 down with less than 2 minutes to go. It was a remarkable. It
was one of the games, and we brought that game up in other situations when you're challenged or you think that things aren't going to go well, and I think it'll be probably 16 or 18 in a couple of years.
Exactly. It's getting bigger.
45 seconds. I'll never forget that play. I'll never forget it. And it was an incredible play. And we went down to we went to Clovis North, and then we went to Pleasant Valley, and then we went to Sarah. And that halted everything.
Yeah.
We drove, 300-400 miles in the course of those days. We played Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and we had to go all over the state.
And there was a lot of beer drinking by the parents.
We literally went to Fresno, to Chico, to San Mateo in the course of 5 days.
The stories that you still have and talk about. So I have one question. There are things that make good coaches and things that make great coaches. So what do you think the difference is in a great coach?
What I've seen, and this is from high school perspective, I think the best coaches in high school are the ones that are invested the most. Mm-hmm. because you get paid for 3 months. You get paid from November 1st to February. But kids want and need more than that. And so if you don't want to put more time in, your kids aren't going to develop, and that's going to show. If you're invested in kids, and part of that's being an educator, that's what we do. We want to develop kids. And in basketball, we're developing kids through basketball. So I think the coaches that are invested the most and also are willing to change with the times, because the game has changed and we've changed what we did 15 years ago and 10 years ago to try to keep up with the times, I think make the best high school coaches. If you're not putting that time in, somebody else is. And those teams are normally, going to be the teams that are going to be the better teams if everything else is equal. I think being a student of the game is part of changing with the times. If the last time I really studied the game was 15 years ago, I don't even know what's going on. But yeah. I always remind our players this time of the year, the last 3 weeks has been the best learning opportunities of any basketball player, because you can watch college basketball at the highest level and see the things they're doing. And I love when they do something out there that we do. And I'll go back to class and say, did you guys see that back cut? All right, they stole that from us. They must have seen it on our film. And it's the opposite. We still, see in things that other teams do on college, and then we try to utilize that in high school. So be invested and then stay current with the trends that are going on in the sport. And I think the kids will buy in if you buy in. They want that. We have great kids, really great kids right now.
I love it. So I had 2 more questions. You answer this how you want. I've asked you this before. When are you retiring? When's the date?
So it's interesting because I started this teaching year kind of on the fence because teaching is more challenging now. Not as much for the kids. It's just the school environment. There's so much other stuff going on that it's kind of taken away from, what our primary focus is, which is working with kids and teaching kids. So I'm 98.5% sure I'm going to retire from teaching this year. That's what Michael Jordan, when they asked him with the Wizards if he was going to retire, he said, I'm 98.5% sure. I would say 99.5, so Coach Harder doesn't get nervous because he's going to be in PE. So I want to retire from teaching. I've put 37 years in. The way that the system works, there's a certain calculator. If you have years and age, I'm 61 and a half. It's kind of the perfect time to quit teaching. I'd like to coach for another year, possibly 2. We have, Jeff Harder has been our assistant and he's ready to step into that role. But we have great kids in our program right now. It's just hard to step away from those kids. Also, I don't know if I could just stop doing everything right at the same time and wake up and go, okay, I've spent 37 years doing something and I got nothing to do and I got to find something else to do. So I'd like to continue to coach as long as my health is good. I think it'll be actually better and easier to coach if I'm not teaching, because that takes a lot out of you. And I can put even more time into coaching without, impacting anything else. But there'll be a time to step away and maybe change roles and maybe be more of a person that from an assistant role or just help with the program, because Jeff and I are really close. And once he steps in, he will hit the court running, and he has an energy level and a thirst for knowledge in basketball that is, as good as any young coach that I've been around. And not everybody is like that. And Jeff is going to be special. And hopefully he's getting a lot from his experience with me. And I'll be ready to support him when he steps into that role.
So to be fair, I have to ask a follow-up question there. I think I've known you 10 years, somewhere in that range. And every year I hear is your last. How many times have you said, I've got 1 or 2 more years in me?
Sounds like some people we know.
Yeah. I will say that I normally say I take every year.
He said 98.5. Anthony, give him a break.
But teaching, I'm almost 100%. And I got to turn my paperwork in, and I'm ready to do that. And I've come to grips with it. But it is, you were in the Marines, right? You had a career in the military, and when you shift gears,
it's hard.
Yeah. I don't know what that'll look like. And the other piece is my wife is younger, and she's front office secretary at Loomis Grammar. She loves her job. She's going to continue to work. So we're going to wake up. She's going to go to work, and I'm going to stay home, and I'm going to,
really work.
Sounds like you just signed up for another 3 to 5.
So coaching, I could see continuing in some capacity, even if it's not the head coach, just be a part of and help. And I've coached golf, both boys and girls. I've coached football, baseball, softball, volleyball. I've coached at the high school level, been head coaches and lower level coaches in all those sports. So I could see myself just staying involved in more of the athletic side and doing some volunteer work. I'd love to work at a golf course, so I can play golf. But the teaching, I would say for sure, again, 98.5% sure. But coaching, I'd like to, we just have great kids right now, and it's hard to step away from those kids.
Well, Johnny's grandson, my grandbaby's 2. So when he gets to your program in 9th grade, I'm going to play this back and say he was retiring back then too.
Well, if I'm there, hopefully I'll be remembering everything. If I'm that old, I'll remember. And I'm hoping I'm just doing this and clapping for Coach Harder and the team that he's going to be coaching at that time, I hope. But I'll still be around. So
this has been an incredible conversation. Last thing for you. Anything you want to just say to those that are listening?
Well, this is year 30. I'm just finishing up year 30 at Rocklin. It's my 37th year overall. And it's been, incredible experience coming back to a community where I grew up, having a chance to be a part of the high school that has been so important to the community overall. Dynamics changed a little bit when they built another high school, but Rocklin still has that history and that culture that, I don't think will ever go away. So I've been privileged, and it really has been a privilege to be in this community, raise my children, work at the high school. Both of my parents are still living in the community, and they're a part of a lot of things that go on. And so I've been lucky as heck. And I would say thanking Phil Spears, who was the first principal of Rocklin High, is something that, I will always be indebted to him, because he took a chance on me. I was a young guy, and he saw something and took a chance on giving me a job. And if he wouldn't have hired me to teach PE and coach basketball, I would have still probably been in Fresno. So Phil Spears is probably the best person that I've ever known in education. And he started the high school, created the culture, and we're all indebted to him for the things that he did. But it's been a privilege, and I've been lucky. I've been lucky to be here, and I've loved, all 30 years that I've been here.
Well, again, I said it before, absolute legend here. You are Rocklin basketball. I appreciate you coming in and spending time talking
thank
to
you. That's kind for you to say, and I'll pay you the $100 afterwards.
Afterward. Well, thank you so much. Educators and coaches are extremely important. So love to, anytime we get to hear a story and get to hear it from your side of things is always really cool. So thank you for sharing.
Well, it's a great job. It's a hard job, but it's a great one. Being a teacher and a coach, it's something special.